this great inheritance and of the duties and heavy responsibilities of sovereignty, which have now passed to my beloved daughter.
The decision landed inside the palace like a thunderclap. Diana's tiara, one of the most emotionally loaded symbols connected to the late princess, had been formally confirmed for Catherine, and Camilla's reaction was immediate. No argument, no carefully prepared royal smile. She rose, turned away from the discussion, and walked out. But what looked like a dispute over jewelry was something far more dangerous. A collision between memory, status, marriage, motherhood, and the future of the crown. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles knew the ruling would cut deeper than anyone wanted to admit. The palace had confirmed Catherine, Princess of Wales, the title held by the wife of the heir to the throne, as the recognized royal custodian and future wearer of the tiara. A royal custodian means the person officially entrusted with caring for and using an item tied to the monarchy. The crown, here, meant the royal institution itself. This was not a temporary loan. It was a settled decision. Camilla listened without interrupting, but her face changed the instant Catherine's name was spoken. She asked whether the decision was final. The answer came back with painful simplicity: yes. The queen consort did not argue. She pushed her chair back, stood, and left before anyone could soften the moment. Catherine remained seated. She felt no triumph because the tiara carried far more than diamonds. Diana's connection to it turned every future appearance into a public comparison, and the princess understood that wearing it would pull her into a history she had never created. William saw that discomfort immediately. The prince also understood why the ruling mattered. His mother's legacy was being placed beside his wife's future, and neither could now be separated from the other. Charles stayed where he was after the door closed. He stared at the confirmation papers while William watched him in silence. The king could have followed Camilla, but he did not. That hesitation exposed the deeper crisis. His wife had walked away wounded. His son was guarding his mother's memory, and Catherine had been handed a symbol powerful enough to unite the monarchy or divide the family around it. No one in that room needed the stakes explained. Camilla feared losing her place to a memory. Charles feared peace inside his marriage was breaking. Catherine feared becoming trapped inside Diana's shadow. William feared neutrality was no longer possible, and nothing could remain untouched now. Camilla had walked away from the decision, but understanding why that decision wounded her so deeply required looking at the four people now trapped inside Diana's unfinished legacy. To the outside world, the dispute could be reduced to one glittering object and one dramatic exit. Inside the family, nothing was that simple. Charles carried a past he could never completely escape. Camilla lived beside the memory of a woman whose name still commanded enormous emotion. William carried that woman's blood. And Catherine, perhaps most painfully of all, was being handed a symbol capable of making her both heir to Diana's legacy and prisoner of comparison. Charles understood why the tiara could never be treated like ordinary royal property. Anything so closely tied to Diana carried emotional weight because it touched William's memories, the public's attachment to his mother, and the monarchy's own troubled history. Royal property, in this context, meant jewelry held or managed within the wider institution, rather than something that could simply be treated as a private, personal possession. The king knew that distinction mattered, but emotion was already overwhelming procedure. Catherine felt that pressure immediately. She had spent years building her own place inside royal life, yet one piece of jewelry threatened to pull her into comparisons with a woman she had never met. William noticed her hesitation and quietly told her she did not have to wear it straight away. The princess looked at him for a long moment, before answering that avoiding it forever would allow fear to decide what Diana's legacy meant. He understood exactly what she meant, and that made the decision feel even heavier. Camilla sat alone after leaving the meeting, and anger slowly gave way to something more painful. She had titles, rank, and a place beside the sovereign, yet none of those things could erase the emotional power Diana still held in public memory. The queen consort was not simply reacting to Catherine receiving a tiara. She was confronting the brutal reality that history had created an invisible hierarchy no ceremony could completely change. Charles eventually went to her without advisors or courtiers between them. The king expected anger. Instead, she told him the announcement made her feel as though the palace had publicly chosen Diana's memory over his living wife. He answered carefully that the decision was never about choosing one woman against another. But that restraint hurt her more than an argument might have done, because beneath his words, she heard the truth he could not soften. Some parts of Diana's legacy were beyond even his power to rewrite. William remained with Catherine, while that conversation unfolded elsewhere, and neither believed the dispute had truly begun that day. Weeks earlier, one specific encounter involving the tiara had already forced the prince and palace custodians to confront its future directly. And when that earlier moment is uncovered, Camilla's walkout stops looking spontaneous. It begins to look like the final reaction to a battle that had already reached its point of no return. Every royal rupture has a moment that later feels inevitable. In this case, it happened weeks before Camilla ever walked out. A ceremonial planning meeting at Windsor was supposed to settle jewelry arrangements for Catherine's upcoming senior appearance. Instead, one request brought the room to a standstill. Diana's tiara was named. Camilla questioned who had authorized its use. William answered, and from that instant forward, the palace could no longer postpone a decision everyone had quietly avoided for years. Catherine had entered the meeting, expecting routine choices, not a family confrontation. Several pieces were being considered for an important state occasion, and royal jewelry custodians, the officials responsible for safeguarding and organizing ceremonial pieces, had included the tiara, long associated with Diana. Until then, the palace had survived through ambiguity. No one had been forced to define exactly who should carry that symbol forward, and that uncertainty had protected everyone from a direct clash. Camilla ended that protection with one question. She asked why Catherine should receive precedence over other senior women. William immediately stiffened. The prince heard more than a question about protocol. To him, it sounded like a challenge to the place his mother still held inside royal history. The queen consort tried to keep her tone measured, but the tension had already changed the room. Catherine moved first to calm it. She said she would wear something else if the tiara caused division, hoping withdrawal might restore peace. William refused. He told her that stepping away simply because the object carried emotional weight would solve nothing. The future king understood that if fear decided the matter now, the same argument would return every time Diana's legacy crossed into Catherine's role. William then made the request that changed everything. He asked the chief jewelry custodian to produce the succession record governing the tiara. A succession record, in this case, meant the formal internal documentation showing how ceremonial use passes between royal generations. In front of Camilla and Catherine, the custodian confirmed that the princess's position placed her in the recognized line for its future use. Camilla went quiet. She did not challenge the custodian directly, but she requested a formal review of the decision. That review meant the palace could no longer hide behind tradition or private understanding. It now had to produce a clear answer, and once that process began, the dispute became impossible to contain. Catherine understood the danger immediately, and William did too. What had started as a question about one tiara had become a test of memory, rank, and control. When the review returned the same conclusion, one final private meeting was arranged. The paperwork may have settled ownership, but it could not settle emotion. And when Catherine and Camilla finally sat across from each other, years of unspoken history entered the room with them. There were no crowds, no cameras, and no ceremonial smiles when Catherine and Camilla finally confronted the issue directly. That made the conversation more dangerous, not less. With Charles and William nearby, the two women sat across from one another, carrying two entirely different versions of the same story. Catherine saw responsibility. Camilla saw rejection. Then one sentence stripped away the protocol completely, exposing the emotional wound beneath a dispute the palace had tried to reduce to procedure. Charles had arranged the meeting because he feared silence was becoming more dangerous than argument. A private family meeting meant exactly that. No formal audience, no public ceremony, and no wider circle of advisors shaping every word. The king wanted the dispute contained before resentment hardened into something permanent. William came to support Catherine, but the prince deliberately held back. He wanted her to speak for herself, not appear as though she were simply defending his mother on his behalf. Camilla spoke first. She told Catherine that wearing Diana's tiara would inevitably be seen as one princess replacing another. The queen consort said the public would not separate symbolism from history, no matter how carefully the palace explained it. Catherine listened without interrupting. Then she answered quietly, "This was never about replacing anyone." Her calmness made the words land harder than anger would have. Camilla pushed back. She told Catherine that history was generous to her because she had inherited affection instead of suspicion. That remark finally shook the princess. She answered that inheriting expectations was not the same as seeking them, and carrying Diana's memory did not mean she had asked to become part of an old battle. William stayed silent, but the future king could feel the conversation moving toward the line he had promised himself he would not cross. Camilla crossed it for him. She questioned why Diana's belongings should still carry such enormous institutional weight after so many years. William immediately intervened. The prince said his mother's history could not be reduced to administration because it remained part of the crown itself. The crown, in this context, meant the monarchy as an enduring institution, not simply the person wearing the crown at that moment. His restraint was gone now, and everyone heard it. Charles stopped the exchange before it became something harsher. The king told Camilla the ruling would stand. She went still because she understood what that meant. He was choosing institutional continuity over domestic peace. Catherine looked toward William, and he knew the decision had now become irreversible. But Charles had not truly created the outcome. Something larger had trapped them all. Camilla had confronted the people. But the real obstacle was a structure far larger than any one marriage, and it was about to reveal why even the king could not simply make Diana's tiara disappear from Catherine's future. Kings possess enormous symbolic authority, but monarchy survives, because even sovereigns operate inside systems they inherit. That reality became impossible for Charles to ignore when the final custodial file reached his desk. The question was no longer whether Camilla felt wounded or whether Catherine felt uncomfortable. The question was whether personal emotion could override succession practice. Charles read the conclusion twice, removed his glasses, and understood that reversing it would create a much larger crisis. Charles sat alone with the review, long enough for the silence to become uncomfortable. The palace review was the formal internal examination of how the tiara should be handled under royal practice, and ceremonial custodianship meant the recognized responsibility for using and preserving an item tied to the institution. The document separated private emotion from public duty. That distinction mattered, because once Catherine's place had been recognized, reversing it would make the monarchy look as though family pressure could rewrite its own traditions. Catherine stood in a unique position within that system. As Princess of Wales, she occupied the role traditionally linked to the wife of the direct heir, and her future as queen placed her even closer to the ceremonial line connected with Diana's legacy. The ruling did not erase Camilla's rank, but it did establish that some royal symbols followed continuity rather than personal preference. And Charles knew exactly how painful that truth would sound inside his marriage. William later asked his father whether anything would be changed. The prince kept his voice controlled, but he wanted a direct answer. Charles looked exhausted when he responded. The king said there were moments when being sovereign meant defending decisions he would personally rather avoid. William understood immediately that his father was no longer considering reversal. He was preparing himself to carry the consequences. Charles returned to the file one final time. The review made one point especially clear. Transferring the tiara elsewhere, after Catherine's claim had been formally recognized, would require extraordinary justification. None existed. No breach had occurred. No ceremonial reason had emerged. Reassigning it now would look less like governance and more like an attempt to protect private feelings. The king signed the confirmation. That signature changed everything. What had begun as a custodial conclusion now carried his personal authority, making it impossible for Camilla to dismiss the outcome as the work of faceless officials. Charles had put his own name behind the decision. Camilla soon learned exactly that. The queen consort realized the announcement she had walked away from had not merely survived her objection. It had been personally approved by her husband. The signature settled the palace question, but inside the marriage it opened another one. How could Camilla return to normal when the man beside her had personally authorized the decision she believed diminished her? Royal crises are not always measured by shouting. Sometimes they are measured by an untouched dinner place, a cancelled conversation, or two people occupying the same residence while speaking through aides. After the Tiara ruling, that quieter kind of fracture descended over Charles and Camilla. She had walked out publicly enough for the family to understand her anger. What followed was more private and more painful. She stopped arguing. And Charles soon discovered that silence could accuse him more effectively than words. Palace staff moved quickly to keep the dispute away from upcoming engagements. An engagement, in royal terms, means an official public duty such as a visit, reception, or ceremonial appearance. The decision over the tiara was treated externally as settled business because any sign of uncertainty could turn a private family wound into a public constitutional embarrassment. Catherine understood that danger too. She deliberately chose not to wear the piece immediately, refusing to make the ruling look like a personal victory, while Camilla was still hurting. Camilla withdrew from an informal evening gathering and returned to her private rooms. The queen consort wanted distance, not another explanation. Charles eventually went to her and found that the anger he expected had become something colder. The king tried to speak, but she stopped him. She told him the technical language no longer mattered. What hurt was the feeling that Diana could still enter their marriage through jewelry, memory, public affection, and every comparison the palace could never fully control. Charles did not defend himself immediately. He finally admitted that he had understood exactly how the confirmation would look before he signed it. The monarch knew Camilla would feel exposed. He also knew William and Catherine would be forced to carry the consequences if he reversed the ruling simply to protect his marriage. That was the choice he had made. Not Catherine over Camilla, not Diana over his wife. Duty over the temptation to make his own past someone else's burden. Camilla heard the difference, and for the first time her anger shifted. She realized Charles had not acted to humiliate her. He had refused to make William pay for wounds created long before the prince had any control over them. The queen consort did not forgive the pain in that moment, but she finally understood the motive behind it. Silence still remained between them, only now it meant something different. Charles had explained the decision, but he could not heal what history had reopened. That would require another conversation entirely. For all the palace rulings and royal signatures, the conflict would ultimately turn on something far simpler. Whether Camilla and Catherine could speak to each other without history speaking louder. The turning point did not happen in front of Charles, William, advisors, or courtiers. It happened when Camilla and Catherine found themselves alone. For the first time since the dispute began, neither woman had an audience to impress or a position to defend. Camilla could stop being queen. Catherine could stop being the future queen. What remained were two people carrying expectations created long before either had been ready for them, and one tiara neither truly considered a prize. Catherine had asked for the conversation herself because she refused to let the ruling poison family relationships long after the formal dispute was over. Camilla agreed, but reluctantly. No advisors attended, and no documents were placed between them. Advisors in this setting meant the officials who normally help senior royals manage decisions, wording, and protocol. Their absence mattered because neither woman could hide behind procedure anymore. Catherine would have to speak as herself, and Camilla would have to listen without the protection of rank. Catherine began carefully. She told Camilla she had never asked to inherit Diana's identity, and did not believe a tiara could transfer one woman's place in history to another. The princess said jewelry could carry memory, but memory was not ownership of another person's life. Camilla listened, and the queen consort finally admitted what had been driving her anger. Seeing Catherine receive the tiara had forced her to confront a fear she had carried for years. No matter how secure her title became, part of the public would always measure her against Diana. Catherine did not comfort her with an easy denial. Instead, she said Diana belonged first to William and Harry, then to history, and only after that, to the mythology created around her. The distinction changed the conversation. Camilla realized the woman sitting opposite her was not trying to claim Diana's place. She was trying to protect the difference between family memory and public legend. Camilla finally said the words Catherine had not expected to hear. She would not challenge the ruling again. The queen consort asked for only one thing. When the tiara was eventually worn, it should be worn as Catherine herself, not as an imitation, tribute act, or replacement for Diana. The princess agreed without hesitation. For the first time, neither woman sounded defeated. The understanding between them was real, but fragile. Camilla had stepped away from the fight, and Catherine had refused to turn victory into triumph. Now their private peace faced a much harder test. Inside the palace, the emotional battle had finally begun to cool, but beyond the gates, Diana's name was about to ignite an entirely different storm. By the next news cycle, a private royal wound had become a national spectacle. Broadcasters replayed the significance of Diana's jewelry. Commentators debated Catherine's place in the princess's legacy. Camilla's walkout became the defining detail. Yet amid the noise, one public moment captured the mood more powerfully than every panel discussion combined. Outside Kensington Palace, strangers began leaving white roses beside photographs of Diana, while images of Catherine appeared across newspaper front pages, only meters away. William watched the coverage with a discomfort he could not hide. The prince felt pride that his mother still inspired such affection. But every tribute also reopened something deeply personal. Palace communications, the official messages released by royal staff to explain decisions to the public, confirmed the custodial ruling, while refusing to discuss private family conversations. That restraint mattered, because one careless sentence could turn a sensitive family decision into a public contest between Catherine and Camilla. The monarchy wanted certainty without humiliation. Catherine understood what the coverage was doing to William. She told him she would not turn the tiara into theater, no matter how loudly the outside world demanded symbolism. The princess knew why the moment mattered. Diana's jewelry connected the past directly to the future monarchy, but wearing it too quickly could make private reconciliation look like public victory. William agreed. He wanted his mother remembered, not used as ammunition in another royal conflict. Camilla faced a different kind of pressure. The queen consort saw headlines describing her departure as defeat, rejection, even surrender. This time, she did not answer them. She remembered what she had promised Catherine in private, and understood that reacting publicly would destroy the fragile peace they had created. Her silence was no longer resentment, it was restraint. Then one front page changed the mood entirely. A major morning newspaper placed Catherine beside an archival image of Diana, beneath the stark headline, "The Tiara Passes Forward." Outside Kensington Palace, royal watchers gathered with white roses, while photographs of the late princess appeared beside handwritten messages of remembrance. The moment was not about Camilla losing, it was about continuity. Charles recognized that distinction immediately. The king saw that the strongest public emotion was not satisfaction at his wife's humiliation, but attachment to a line connecting Diana, William, Catherine, and the next generation. That understanding gave the family something the argument had nearly destroyed: a path toward peace. The noise would eventually fade, headlines would disappear, crowds would leave, and the tiara would return to silence until its next appearance. What remained would matter far more. The world had turned the moment into a contest between two women. The palace's final answer would come by refusing that contest altogether. When the anger faded and the headlines moved on, the truth left behind was quieter than the scandal. Catherine had the tiara. Camilla remained queen. Charles remained her husband. William remained Diana's son. Nothing about those realities cancelled any of the others. The crisis had felt explosive, because the family momentarily treated memory as territory that could be possessed. Resolution came only when they accepted the opposite. Diana's place in history did not have to shrink for anyone else to stand securely beside it. Catherine kept the recognized custodianship and future ceremonial use of the tiara, and the palace confirmation remained unchanged. And ceremonial use meant the formal right to wear the piece during appropriate royal occasions, while preserving its place within the wider institution. That mattered, because the decision no longer rested on temporary emotion. It had become part of the monarchy's settled order. Camilla withdrew her objection permanently, and Charles made clear within the family that no further review would reopen the issue. Charles later thanked Camilla in private for accepting the ruling. The king expected little in return, but she answered with painful honesty. Acceptance, she told him, did not mean the hurt had vanished. It meant she no longer believed a tiara could determine her worth or erase everything she had built beside him. The queen consort had finally separated Diana's enduring memory from her own place in the present. Catherine reached a similar understanding with William. She told him she would wear the piece only when the occasion felt right, never simply because the public expected a dramatic moment. The prince told her that restraint was exactly why he had wanted its future entrusted to her. He did not need his wife to resemble Diana. He needed someone who understood the difference between inheritance and imitation, between respecting memory and becoming trapped inside it. The crisis had therefore changed Catherine's role in a way no title alone could. She was not replacing Diana, defeating Camilla, or borrowing another woman's identity. The princess was becoming a custodian of royal memory, while creating a legacy that belonged entirely to her. Camilla's walkout, once seen as the beginning of an endless feud, instead became the painful breaking point that forced the family to acknowledge what they had avoided for years. Diana's legacy was permanent, but permanence did not diminish the living. The door Camilla slammed behind her had seemed to announce a royal fracture. In the end, it forced the family to open another door entirely, one where Diana could be remembered, Camilla could remain secure, Catherine could move forward, and the crown could finally stop treating one woman's legacy as another woman's defeat. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.